I want you to consider something a little bit different. Okay, it's very different. And coming from somebody who's struggled with Christmas being so wrong, the celebration of it being so wrong, and little bits and pieces about Christmas in particular, we'll get back to that in a minute, but little bits and pieces about Christmas that it just really bugged me over the years. I understand that there are different parts of life that tend to irk each and every one of us in different ways. And this doesn't just have to be following God. It's things it's liberties that some have that maybe you don't have. It's misunderstanding as to intentions that people have. It can't be done that way because when it was done that way in my family, in my life, the reasons and the motives were wrong. So it must be wrong for you. And that gets into completely strange and crazy areas when it comes to the whole idea of whether or not and how much to drink when it comes to alcoholic beverages, and do you have wine or beer, or what's out and what's in, and what should a Christian do, and what's the right and what's the wrong, and what's the in-between. Some of you know what I'm talking about. It gets hard to breathe. Particularly when you're in a conversation with people who've got very different ideas around what's right and wrong in the church. And I don't know whether that's the right question that we should be asking. Bit of a crazy introduction. Stick with me, and today with people who are around you. Maybe you're watching this and you're with no one else. Maybe it's time to stop and find someone to watch this with, because I really believe that a conversation needs to happen in a moment. And hopefully my chat won't be too long and your chat will be quite long, that resolves and revolves around an idea of something that you can do together, and a risk that you can take, and some ground that can be taken that maybe you didn't realise needed to be taken. So I want to challenge you with this idea, and we've got an opportunity. I'm putting it out there on July the 6th to reimagine Christmas. Why? Because I believe the word itself, if we really look at it, the idea of, in essence, celebrating the death of Jesus, Mass, meaning death, celebration of a death sacrifice, which, look at the history of that. But even if you looked at it from the perspective that many do, that it's just a service, a celebration service, well, a celebration service of Christ is something that we're called to do every time we come together. Acts 2 in particular talks about the people devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to that doctrine, and to the breaking of bread, to fellowship, and other things. Have a look at that. No, let's look at that. Acts chapter 2 verse 42. In front of you now on the screen. Then those who gladly received this word were baptized. This word being, be saved from this perverse generation, and other things that had been said. Then those who gladly received this word were baptized. And that day about 3,000 souls were added to them. And they continued steadfastly in the doctrines, the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, in the breaking of bread, and in prayers. Let me repeat that to you again. Verse 42. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, in the breaking of bread, and in prayers. Then fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. Now all who believed were together. They had all things in common. They sold their possessions and goods and divided them among all, as anyone had need. And so continuing daily. So continuing daily with one accord. Did you get that? So continuing daily with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house. Again, so continuing daily with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house. They ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart. Oh, we overcomplicate things. Praising God and having favor with all people, not just the church, with all people. And the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved. What a complicated and awesome message. We could go over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and yet there's keys in there that we miss because we've got this mindset that church is once a week or just home group or whatever else. So ponder that just for a moment. So the celebration of Jesus. In our homes. What does that look like? I don't know. What does it look like to you? Because it probably looks different to me. And it probably looks different to the person across the street. And that's what I get when I read the account in the Bible. The fact that Paul and the other apostles needed to address the churches in different cities and different regions around some of the hassles that they had. And some of the biggest hassles that they had were trying to understand what the difference between right and wrong were. And Acts chapter 15 in particular addresses this issue where circumcision and all of these old school ritualistic religious things for the Jews and for the Jews, God's people, were really important to them. And then it seems like God's bringing these other people in who've got these pagan practices and they're trying to say, no, you can't do that anymore, and you've got to do the whole circumcision and the foreskin thing, and you can't be a part of us unless you do that, and because that's what God said. But then, like he's saying to us now, what was right yesterday and is right today is not necessarily right for you today. That the standard is still the same. But God's calling us to this liberty and this freedom in Him, where what that physical representation was about is now a spiritual representation. And you don't get it because you can't get your head around it. But you can get your head around it and your heart around it when you actually experience life together. And things happen when you risk life that you go, oh, I get it. I understand what they're talking about. I understand the complexity of this life that we're called to, because it's meant to be experimental. It's meant to be experienced. So again, there's an opportunity on July the 6th. Christmas in July, a chance to celebrate Jesus, a chance to take a Sabbath day, if you want to think about it that way, a chance to look at church differently because you're not going to a building you might call church, and say, how can I honour Jesus, and who do I get around, and when it comes to tithes and offerings, what do I do with that? I know it's crazy, but it just could be crazy enough to be God. That He throws us in the deep end and says, what are you going to do now? Can I just close with this thought? And you might feel like I've gone nowhere today, but I want to encourage you to be open to what the Holy Spirit might say as you prayerfully ask Him what to do. Did you get that? Ask Him what to do. The fact that you've got questions right now and your mind is swimming and you're really not sure where to go is a good place to be at, because He's got all the answers. But you know, early on in the formation of the church and the release of those to do exactly what Acts 2 is all about, coming together, having all things in common, caring and sharing and breaking bread, they missed something as well. In fact, the gospel was always meant to go. It was always meant that we as people would be mobilized in our twos, in our families and in life to go and bring that message to the world. And there's a point in the history of the church and very early on where persecution came and people needed to disband from some of these gatherings and homes, and find new places to live and new places to experience Jesus, and to share that with others. And the church grew exponentially. There was something powerful that took place, because what they took was the very foundations of what they believed in the breaking of bread and in fellowship and teaching and baptism and all of that, and they took it to those who hadn't experienced it yet. And the Holy Spirit did amazing things and brought boldness and clarity, and signs and wonders preceded everything that was going on. They had to do that. They were forced to do that. And to a certain degree, I feel like God is forcing us to reimagine what church is really about by saying, you know what? On July the 6th, when there will be no hall open for you to gather, when there will be no things that you normally expect to do on a Sunday morning, for instance, when there's not going to be a black bucket that you put your money in, when all of these things, so what are you going to do? How are you going to celebrate Jesus? Because that is the question. I want to leave this with you today. The end of the day, Christmas, Christ Mass, celebrating it in July, on July the 6th, celebrating Jesus, celebrating his life, not just his death, but his resurrection, that he's alive and he lives in us. How are you going to do that? Don't just take a day off. What a waste. How are you going to honour Jesus with your family? Are you going to invite others to be a part of that? Are you going to invite others within the church? Are you going to open your home? Are you going to go somewhere else? Are you going to break bread? Are you going to... What are you going to do? Be inventive. Be open. Ask him. Have a chat. See what the people around you think about that. What could you do that honours him, and that you could actually call church? When people said, what did you do on July the 6th? You go, let me tell you. But here's a final challenge to you. And I'll highlight this again in the next couple of sessions possibly. I want you to be open to actually record the things that you do. Hashtag reimagine Christmas. Photos, stories. I am so looking forward to us all sharing the amazing things that God did when we were open to letting him do whatever he wanted to do. Not just on that day, but that it would be a catalyst for the many days that follow to live life to the fullest. Enjoy your time together. What are you going to do on July the 6th? How are you going to reimagine Christmas? How are you going to reimagine celebrating him?